Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Nina Ha, and I'm the director of the APIDA Plus Center. I want to welcome you to tonight's event for APIDA Heritage Month. It is APIDAs in public service and nonprofits. And we are very fortunate because, as you can see, there are at least 3 alums from Virginia Tech. So I'm very excited about that too. Before we begin, as per usual, I'd like to start with the land and labor acknowledgement. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutalolo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands in California and other areas in the West. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations, owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. Enslaved Black people generated resources that financed Virginia Tech's predecessor institution, the Preston and Nolan Institute, and they also worked on the construction of its building. So as I also like to just say, it's important to acknowledge our histories as well. Once again, welcome everybody to APIDA Heritage Month. Typically, this happens during May federally. But for Virginia Tech and at other colleges and institutions, we tend to acknowledge APIDA Heritage Month in April. There are lots of events and programs that the APIDA Plus Center offers, and feel free to go to our website to check out all of our events and programs. Without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Tamizu.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Nina, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this much anticipated and insightful event. Like Dr. Nina said, my name is Temujin Chorjilsurin, and I will be your moderator tonight. For those who do not know me, I'm a senior here at Virginia Tech pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. I'm also an active member of the Korean American Student Association, the Vietnamese Student Association, First Year Leadership Experience, and the Political Science Club. Now, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First off, we have Jacqueline Marmol. Jacqueline Marmol is the outreach representative for U.S. Senator Mark Warner. In this role, Jacqueline builds and maintains relationships with community stakeholders, builds out events for the senator, and represents him at engagements. Prior to joining Senator Warner's office, Jacqueline served as staff aide to Fairfax County School Board Chair Carl Frisch and political assistant with End Citizens United's Independent Expenditure. Jacqueline graduated from Virginia Tech in May 2020 and is an active alumna. She currently chairs the Asian Pacific Islander DESI Alumni Society and is a member of the Division of Student Affairs Young Alumni Board. Now I'd like to introduce Jess Nguyen. Rooted in liberation frameworks from the Black radical feminist tradition, Jess brings into her work with Asian communities in America a holistic understanding concerning systems of power. Jess works with the API Domestic Violence Resource Project, also known as DVRP, to lead research efforts, facilitate community outreach, and sculpt anti-violence political education curriculum. They are also a co-founder and organizer with Viet Place Collective. As a multi-instrumentalist and songwriter, you can often find Jess fusing her craft with community grassroots initiatives. Now I'd like to introduce Jinwoo Kwang. Jinwoo Kwang is the Deputy Communications Director in the United States House of Representatives. Prior to joining Capitol Hill in 2021, he worked as the communications assistant for the Korean American Grassroots Conference following his graduation from the University of Maryland at College Park in 2020. In addition to his work, Jinwoo serves as the communications chair for the Congressional Korean American Staff Association. In his free time, he organizes monthly events for Asian American Republican Hill staffers. Now I'd like to introduce Kent Tong. Kent Tong is the manager of programs at OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates, a 501c3 national membership-driven nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., dedicated to advancing the social, political, and economic well-being of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. In this role, Kent oversees OCA's youth programs, including high school and college leadership and advocacy trainings, high school and college academic scholarships, and college internships. Kent was born and raised in the greater New Orleans area to Vietnamese refugee parents, an alumnus from Loyola University, New Orleans, majoring in studio art and minoring in film studies. Kent dedicated his time outside the classroom to various Vietnamese interest organizations. It's through his experiences as executive director of Camp Delta, president of the Union of Vietnamese Student Associations Gulf Coast, and president of the Loyola Asian Student Organization, where Kent developed a passion in youth development and programming. Prior to joining OCA, Kent was a volunteer staff member of the 2020 Project, a 2017 Jubilee Project Fellow, and a 2014 Disney College Program cast member. In his free time, he enjoys watching movies in theaters, usually one or two every weekend, writing reviews on his blog, and baking Ted Lasso biscuits. And next, I'd like to introduce Quinn Nguyen. Quinn Nguyen is a queer second-generation Vietnamese American rooted in Northern Virginia. They have a background in biochemistry and community participatory public health research. But it was through their student leadership involvements in college that they found their passion for helping people build political consciousness. Currently, Quinn works at the Humke Center, an Asian American community-based nonprofit in Northern Virginia, as their digital organizer to amplify Humke Center's work online by maintaining and strategizing content across all programs for the website, emails, and social media. They are also a co-founder and core organizer for Viet Place Collective, a grassroots group formed in December 2022 for anti-displacement measures in Vietnamese cultural preservation in Falls Church. Quinn fully believes that the personal is political and is passionate about learning local history, building community for liberatory change, and making resources accessible to all. So those are our panelists here tonight. We have Kent, Quinn, Jacqueline, Jess, and Jinwook. Now we're going to shift gears and go into the Q&A. So the first question I wanted to ask, and feel free to just go at it. Don't hesitate to answer. But the first question is, could you please explain the type of work you do and your organization's purpose?
I'll start. Okay, so thank you, Temujin, and thank you, Dr. Ha, for bringing us all together. It's funny because I did this panel last year and I had a different job, so I get to explain this one. So I do outreach for Senator Mark Warner. He's the senior senator that represents Virginia. And we serve all Virginians. But my job is to build and maintain relationships with all different constituencies, stakeholders, community members in Virginia. Actually, Senator Warner is in Southwest Virginia right now. He was just 20 minutes away at Radford University. But for example, when he's not in my region of the Commonwealth, so I serve the Northern Virginia region, I go to events on his behalf. I also try to find events where he can engage with community members. I'll speak specifically to the APIDA community. For example, I brought him to Eden Center for Lunar New Year. We also host Commonwealth Coffees on the Hill. So we have different constituency groups in which we celebrate different heritage months, or our scouts, our academy nominees. And so we tried to celebrate all these different communities that make up the Commonwealth of Virginia, but also try to understand what the issues are so that he's well informed when he's making decisions.
Hi, my name is Jin Wook. Since we're on the Hill topic, then I'll go next naturally. I'm working as a deputy comms director for a congressman, and much of the comms is really anything that goes out, anything that you read about from a member, a congress member, or things like that. That's really the work of communications. And I think being an Asian American, it's really important for me to, I think it's really important for Asian Americans to be involved in communications, because if we want to be represented, why don't we be closer to the mic, right? And I think the biggest thing that I feel is, and I'll probably go in more in detail later, but when we talk about Hill staffers, like people working on the Hill, we have a lot of people who are Asian Americans working in legislative issues or maybe district issues. There are not as many in the communications issue. And personally, English is my second language, but for me, I've really gotten into this space using like digital and sort of that sort of arena. But for me, I've really experienced being an Asian American and being a comms. I realized that's such a unique privilege, and I would, by the end of it, I'll probably promote that once again later. So, but yeah, that's me.
Speaking of transitions, I also work in comms. I don't mind going next. Again, my name is Quinn. I am the digital organizer at Hamke Center. Hamke Center is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Annandale and Centerville, Virginia, just generally Northern Virginia. But that's just where we have offices. We organize Asian Americans in Virginia for social, racial, economic justice. And as the digital organizer, I used digital communication tools that include social media, email, website, texting, probably missing other petitions, to strategically and efficiently help all Hamke Center teams reach their goals. I play a role, much like Junuk said, play a role in reframing narratives. We specifically, because we're more we're one of the only Pan-Asian explicitly progressive organizations in Virginia. We often challenge dominant narratives, and I play a role in helping shape the messaging that we put out, talking points, all that.
Hey folks. Thank you, Temujin, and thank you, Dr. Nina Ha, for having us here today. I see the folks at the ACE Center eating. I hope y'all are feeling nourished. I hope y'all are studying, taking notes, feeling well today. My name is Jess. I work with the Asian Pacific Islander Domestic Violence Resource Project, DVRP for short. We are based in downtown DC, but we serve the broader tri-state DMV area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I work on the outreach team, and because I work for a small nonprofit organization, I wear many hats. The mission of our organization is to mobilize API communities to respond to harm and violence. I kind of do more of the prevention work rather than directly speaking with survivors and managing cases. That's what our other team does. So what that consists of is building political education curriculum, going into the community and teaching about it, doing outreach work, engaging with our communities. DVRP also is the only Pan-Asian domestic violence organization in the entire tri-state area. And yeah, that's it for me. Pass it to Kent.
Thank you, Jess. So I'm the manager of programs at OCA. So I handle everything that's programs related, so not necessarily policy related. So I oversee our scholarship programs. So we have a bunch of scholarships for first-gen Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander students. So if anyone's in HBI graduating college, we have a scholarship for that. If you're about to graduate high school, we have a scholarship for that. And we also have a scholarship for grad students who are pursuing a career in public service and who are studying public administration or anything similar to that. I also manage our internship program. So the summer internship program is one of the things that we're most known for. It's a 10-week internship program where we place students to work full-time at a federal agency, congressional office, a nonprofit, a private corporation. Jacqueline is an alumni of that program, so it's great to have her on this panel too. And then yeah, I mostly just do event planning and partnership building. So I assist with any various events that we have over the year, including our summer national convention that we host annually. And then also I seek out partnerships with student orgs and schools, API student orgs to help them host their programs, so leadership development programs, professional development, advocacy programs. So I mostly work with high school students and college students in my role.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, go back a few years. So I just want to know what experience, especially in college, helped you forge a path into public service and nonprofits specifically? What majors or minors did you study in college, and why did you decide upon this path?
I'll go. I'll go. So I didn't start off. So I graduated with a poli-sci degree, but I didn't start off in poli-sci. I was a business management major, and I quickly learned that I was not good at the classes that you had to take to be in business management. And so because I think college, and others may agree or disagree, but college is like the perfect time to figure out your interests and kind of develop who you are. You know, you're constantly growing, but I learned a lot about myself in college, and one of the ways I learned more about my interests were just joining different clubs. So I joined an Asian interest sorority, and then I joined the Asian American Student Union, and those two organizations kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that I like, I like helping people. I like advocating for my community. So I got very involved with those organizations. When I was um, VP, external vice president of AASU was when we met with administrators, and I see KK is on this call too. And she was there. She helped spearhead the conversations about creating what is now the APIDA Plus Center. And so being able to see the fruits of our labor was very heartwarming, and that kind of pushed me to keep going into this space and exploring what it is to be an advocate, what it is to be more politically involved. So then I got involved with, of course, OCA when I was an intern in the summer of 2018. I got more involved with nonprofits that were focused on putting Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in public service roles. So whether it's working for a member of the House or the Senate or any of the state or local legislatures. I even got involved in state campaigns and national campaigns for 2018, 2019, and 2020. And that just solidified the fact that I do like helping people. I like door knocking. I like talking to people and hearing what their issues are. But I think what really nailed it, what was like the final sign for me was after I was working on these campaigns, I realized I get to talk to folks on the campaign trail about what issues matter to them, but I don't get to see that through because I'm not on the quote unquote official side. I'm not in the legislator's office. So that's when that's when I was thinking, okay, maybe I should look into a career that's solely in public service. But none of that would have happened had I not joined organizations that sparked some sort of interest. So I think it's very important that in college, if you see something that remotely sparks your interest, just do it. The worst you can do is just leave if it doesn't meet your needs, but at least you can say you tried, and you never know what may come of that experience.
Yeah, my experience was similar to Jackie's in terms of the organizational bit. I was a student worker at the ACE Center with Dr. Ha for a bit, and I was also the president of the Asian American Student Union my last year at Virginia Tech, which also happened to be the pandemic year. Um, I studied economics as my major. I initially came in with the intention of wanting to be a game theoretical economist because I really wanted to learn more about human behavior and how human decisions, modeling human decisions could help us understand broader systems better. But I eventually pivoted into understanding more about political education and understanding how broader systems of oppression work to reinforce each other, which is why I do the work I do now as a political educator. I also minored in Asian studies, um, and PPE, which is philosophy, politics, and economics. Hold on, I'm reading the second part of the question. I have it on my lap right now. Yeah, working with AASU as president exposed, honestly, a lot of frustrations about lack of funding for our students and our folks. It exposed a lot of frustrations about not just lack of representation, but lack of very transparent channels of communication for change. Um, and it was very difficult because it was the pandemic year, and that was the time of a lot of political unrest, and a lot of hate crimes were happening on campus towards Asian students and across the country. So I was also just, I don't know about y'all, but when I started school at Virginia Tech, I didn't have any political education concerning Asian American communities or Asian communities in America. So a lot of that process about learning about our history, and how deeply rooted it is, and how much our people have helped with the development of everything was really, it was unsettling to me because a lot of that history had been covered up and erased. So I continued to pursue different paths that would lead me to understanding that history better, and leading me down different avenues to continue advocating for my community, and also to speak with folks and to know their stories, because storytelling is such an important component of knowing our community better, learning from each other, and carrying and honoring legacies of our communities.
I can go next. So, I think like it seemed like Jack and Jess, I did not pursue a career in what I studied in. I majored in art and film. I just like doing that as a hobby. I like drawing. I like editing film, shooting films. And so I didn't really have a career in mind. And then by the time I graduated, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this as a career. And so I looked back on what I enjoyed doing in college, and I was heavily involved in Vietnamese Student Association, so VSA. And I really enjoyed event planning, facilitating and creating like workshops to develop students. And so I was like, maybe I want to help people like as a career. Because I also I was never really advocacy minded or social justice minded until like later half of college, and I like started to understand these things more. And so I thought, okay, maybe I want to do social work, but I didn't want to go back to school, so I said no. And then HR, but then people were telling me, oh, you're really like not helping people, you're helping like the company. So I was like, okay, maybe not HR. So my last option was nonprofit. So I didn't know anything about nonprofits, just applied to as many as I could. I actually applied to OCA, did not get the job at the time. Just applied to any nonprofit I could. And it took several years to get to that point, but eventually I was able to work at a nonprofit, OCA, and doing exactly what I love doing in college. So again, event planning, working with students, facilitating workshops, things like that. So it's just like the perfect job for me right now. And so that's the quick story of how I got to OCA.
All right, I can go next. So I, my mom is she was a dentist. My dad was a surgeon. Is a surgeon. So naturally, I majored in government politics. Honestly, it was I had to have that conversation with my parents, but I mean, they knew all along that I was very passionate about government and public service arena, and so thankfully, unlike the stereotypes that we are often accused of, they've been really understanding. So yeah, I majored government politics, international relations for University of Maryland at University of Maryland, and yeah, I for me, it was really more of a passion, and I seriously try to give the medical career a chance. I took my first biochem. I said it's not gonna work out, so that's that's how it happened. And but since I knew where I was going, I went on that path. And yes, Queen, thank you for that affirmation there. But yeah, so I started going, taking classes in Asian American, you know, so even like Asian American politics, like took different classes and try to understand it. I think there is a reason why a lot of members of Congress are not government politics major. I think it's really because like when we study it and that we expect things to go according to what we say is like how it should work, politics is a place where it doesn't happen. And so I think that has given me a lot of chance to kind of reflect on my life and say like, what did I do for 4 years? But I'm glad I graduated there. I'm especially thankful because I went to University of Maryland, and that's like only 40 minutes from my house, which is Fairfax, and also from DC, it's only 30 minutes. So I was able to do more internships, and that's also why I've been very more intentional about getting people intern on the Hill, or intern for these internship opportunities that could benefit you, instead of sitting in classrooms that you could read on Wikipedia while you're like Wikipedia surfing. So that's why that's honestly, it's not. I wish I had more empowering message for y'all, but I think even as you're studying, it's really important to understand like what kind of community you're in. When I was in University of Maryland, I was in the student government, and trying to figure out like different factions and try to understand what the demands are and how we can really come to the solution. And sometimes like why we shouldn't get to a solution. Like all of that was really helpful for me to apply here, because at the end of the day, politics you see in campuses, or politics you see in like nonprofits. I worked in nonprofit before. I know there's politics there too, right? Whereas nonprofit, or even like a hospital working, I hear from my dad about like the drama there, and I hear from my mom, who was in army, hearing about that whole military like drama, and I'm like, okay, so politics exists everywhere, and I think it's really good to kind of keep in mind of that as you're like studying whatever you're studying, and keeping in mind like who you are, because I think that's really what matters at the end of the day. Because we are all here because we're Asian Americans. What does that mean? I may have different definitions than y'all have. I think that's what's really beautiful about this sort of session.
think I'm the last to go. In the chat, in the Zoom chat, I had said me, when in all caps, when Jinuk had said like he tried a biochemistry class. I was indeed a biochemistry major because I thought I wanted to be a doctor. Obviously that did not work out. I wasn't satisfied with how elitist the whole application process was. Got really sick and tired of my parents kind of forging my path for me. And so I used college as a way to like find out what I liked really. I will say though, even though my major didn't spark me any joy, my one of my minors did. I took I wonder if it's still there at Tech. It's called Medicine and Society. It's about like how um society impacts medicine rather than the other way around, just more conventionally known. But in that major, I had took classes about like technology and disability, and like and the medicine and society classes that helped me think about like why and how our society functions in the ways that it does, why it uplifts certain identities and why it punishes others. Especially with the technology and disability class, it really helped me like it opened my eyes to how society really devalues disabled people. And that was really integral in my path to like how do you say, developing my own political consciousness, of especially being anti-capitalist. If y'all have room in your schedule, take the technology and disability class. If it's still offered, Dr. Ashley Shu offers it. Anyway, I love her a lot. But anyway, both of these classes helped me gain like this critical life skill of like, instead of accepting certain conditions or taking things as face value, like I've really learned to question why things are the way they are. And that's something that I've carried throughout my life. In terms of like the specifics of like Asian Americanness, um, I personally found the Asian culture orgs at Virginia Tech incredibly unsatisfying to be in, because they never really talked about politics or identity or history, nothing really beyond a surface level understanding of culture, like food, music, clothes. And I was like, that's not enough for me. Like I want to talk about um I want to talk about why we what forces made us come to this country, like how that impacts our mental health. Like they would joke about childhood trauma but never actually address it. Like I wanted to dig deeper into issues of identity, and these culture orgs were clearly not the space for that. So I found an org that like was founded in my freshman year, I think. It was called Asian American Coalition. Not sure if it's still around. But that joining that org and subsequently leading it for the next 3 years of my college career led me to teach myself Asian American history. At that time, there was really only one Asian American course at Virginia Tech. I hope it's expanded since then. It was called Asian American Experiences. But anyway, there wasn't really any uh, previous structure set up to learn Asian American history, so I had to do that shit myself. But I really enjoyed learning about history and talking with other people, other like-minded people about um, how their identities impact their experiences and how they like operate, how they live in the world, how we got here, um, even like how we ended up at Virginia Tech. Like that's the stuff I really like to talk about. And after I graduated, I realized that like, yeah, definitely don't want to be a doctor. So what's left for me? I wanted to like look more into like how can I bring this uh how can I bring together more Asian Americans to um, realize their political power, to build their political consciousness, and that's how I found Hubke Center.
Wonderful. And I think Dr. Nina can speak to the Asian American Experience class since she teaches that class now. But definitely the Asian American community here, at least at Virginia Tech, has grown by a lot. It's a very strong community. I can definitely say that. But the shortfalls that you brought up, Quinn, I'll definitely keep that in mind. I'm a very active member in that community, but that's another perspective I never thought about. So I'll definitely keep that in mind. Thanks for bringing that up. So we're going to continue strolling down memory lane. We're going to go into our post-college life now. So I just want to know, what was your career path like after college? Who and or what helped you along the way? And do you have any tips and tricks you want to share with everyone here? I know everyone kind of answered this already, but now is the chance to really hone in on that aspect.
I can go first. So my story is kind of all over the place. Because I pursued a career that's separate from what I majored in, it was a little bit hard. I was struggling to find a nonprofit job for a couple of years. So in the meantime, I worked for Kung Fu Tea, New Orleans, for like a year and a half. Really loved the job. I love like just doing the job in this fast-paced environment, and getting free boba every day. But I was getting tired of like struggling to find a full-time job. And so I applied to the Jubilee Fellowship. So for those of you who don't know, that YouTube channel that's really popular, Jubilee Media, they used to be a nonprofit called Jubilee Project. So they used to do an annual summer like fellowship where 12 filmmakers from around the world, like young filmmakers, get chosen and meet in LA for 2 weeks and partner with each other to create film projects. And so I was lucky enough to be chosen as one of those, and did the fellowship even though I didn't want to pursue a career in film yet. I just needed like some inspiration. And so I did it. And then when I came back, I was like, I'm not staying in New Orleans anymore. I'm gonna move because I'm so inspired. Like I don't want to be stuck. And so I just picked up and moved to Portland, Oregon, where I had a friend who was from there and had a spare bedroom, and rent was really cheap. So I was trying to find jobs there. I ended up working part-time jobs at like Cracker Barrel and Chipotle to make ends meet. And then eventually I was able to get an interview for a startup tech company in Chicago. They make smart water bottles where they track how much water you drink, reminds you to drink water, things like that. And I had a friend I met through VSA who was working for that company, and she was hiring for her job because she was getting promotion. So she was able to get my foot in the door. get me an interview with CEO, and thankfully I got the job. I worked for there for a year, and then OCA ended up opening a fellowship, a programs fellowship. And so I applied, and luckily, one of my best friends from college, who I also met through VSA, she knew the programs manager at the time. His name was Andrew. They did the Kapal program together. And so that's how they knew each other. And so she was able to get me to connect me with him. I got to hop on a call with Andrew before I even interviewed. And then I think that helped a lot. And then eventually I got hired. And so I've been with OCA since, but as you can see, like I had a lot of different jobs over the years on food, boba, startup tech companies. And so, and I know we had a question later that talks about like advice, but I mean, I can just mention it now. My advice for college students is to really take advantage of all the opportunities you have in college, and like networking with people. And I don't mean networking like to use people later on, but it's like networking, make actual genuine friendships. The friends I made along the way who like helped me review my resume, cover letter, helped me job search, and helped me get connected with people. Those are just friends I made through VSA. Like I didn't know I was gonna like get anything from them. And so just keep networking with people who are on your level. People think networking is like, oh, I have to meet with CEOs or like presidents, things like that. But really the people who will help you are like on your level. You'll like help each other grow together. So that's my story and my advice. So I'll pass it on to whoever wants to go next.
I love that piece of advice. My piece of advice for this section was really similar. I was going to encourage folks to build non-extractive relationships out of genuine interest. So you hit the nail on the head right there, Kent. But I also bounced around after I graduated as well. I remember being so fully burnt out by the time I graduated that it didn't even fully register in my head that I was graduating and that it did happen. So when school was over, naturally, I wanted to take a break. And this is a non-traditional route, especially for a lot of second gen, third gen, first gen Asian kids who went to school in America. But I just knew logically from the experiences that I had with grappling with a lot of the political unrest and the relentless advocacy that I had to push and my team had to push during my last year. And Nina was there, she can attest to it as well. It was a lot to process, and I didn't fully have a grasp on how I wanted to continue. And I didn't want to work at a pace that I knew that my mind and my body couldn't keep up with. So I took this time to deepen my meditation practice, to deepen growing closer to a lot of the Buddhist principles that my family had passed down to me, and also to really develop a framework of critical power analysis to apply to any organization I join, any entity that I join, because it's really hard to be able to tell how the organization is functioning, how they're going to treat you if you don't have a framework for which you are able to look at and reference to understand different power dynamics, who's making the decisions, how much say do you have in the decisions being made, how are they going to treat you, how do they treat each other, right? And when I graduated, I felt quite lost, to be honest. I was seeking mentorship, so um, during the keynote speech for in the A Center for the graduation event celebrating API folks, we brought in a keynote speaker named June Millington, and she was she was in the first all-women rock and roll band to be signed to a major record label in the United States, and she also happened to be Filipino. And we had found out, or I had found out, that she ran a music institute with her partner, Ann Hackler, who is a well-seasoned organizer and someone I admire and respect and revere deeply. And they ran the music school up north and had invited me to come and hang out. So I took like a 1 month long road trip, stopping along the way to meet friends, stopping along the way to meet strangers. And when I finally arrived, it was the most transformative experience I'd ever had in my life because I allowed I allowed myself to have the time and space to be open to these connections and these stories and to meet folks who have such varied experiences, decades and decades of wisdom. And it really transformed me and pushed me to continue furthering my analysis and understanding of what I wanted. I also was at the time committed to working with Southpaw Cafe and Community Space in Blacksburg, Virginia. I was one of the core organizers on the team, working at the Mutual Aid Cafe, deepening my understanding of political education. And eventually, when I came to a place where I felt like a lot of those values were solidified, um, I decided to move forward and look for API organizations to work for and advocate for, and that's how I landed with DVRP.
How do you follow up to that? I wish I had as transformative of an experience after college as Jess did. I'll like my experience after college was quite short. I mean, it wasn't. I was fun employed for no, I wasn't. I like went back to a job I had prior to college. Um, it's like a job within the family. So I was like a receptionist. I was a receptionist for a dentist office, but I didn't really have to apply to it because I would just go back every summer. Anyways, I had that for like quite a few months. And while also trying to deal with my parents breathing down my neck for not having another job, like having a job lined up after graduation. So yeah, I was stuck at home for like months, pretty much, doing a job that I wasn't like, I was like, okay, yeah, this is temporary. I like need to find something else. My mom did her best to try to like help me branch out and find things. She had a friend who forwarded me a job opening at Hamke Center, which was then called Neckarsack, Virginia. Um, and so I applied. I was lucky to get an interview, and then I was rejected. But they were like a nonprofit of like 8 people at the time, and a few months later, like I want to say 5 months after that, I got a call back from the director, and she was like, "Quinn, I don't do this often, but I saw that you had prior experience in like social media. Do you want to help run our social media?" And I was like, hell yeah, okay. And then I joined in January 2020. And I've been here since. So it's like 4.5 years at a nonprofit. And for nonprofits, I hear that's a pretty long time. That's a pretty long time to be at a nonprofit, especially at an entry level role. Turnover is admittedly quite high for nonprofits, but like I appreciated the work environment that Humke Center has provided so much that I have stayed since then. But yeah, that interview was only my second interview ever, and this job is only my second job ever. And I don't know, I just feel pretty lucky. But in terms of like tips I have for folks who are looking for jobs, like I find job searching incredibly soul sucking. And I wish I spent more time with friends and family during that process so I wouldn't like I was like burnt out from job searching. Isn't that so sad? Like but also like after you find that job, having a job will suck away your free time. So I think you all deserve to be in a job that you don't dread waking up every day to do. I don't want to go too far to say you should love what you do, but like don't hate it. Because if you hate it, then like that's going to trickle into your performance, not only performance, but your mental health as well. Like mental health really really should be your like number one priority.
Just wanted to flag for folks in the room who may not see the chat, but Kent mentioned that turnover is high in nonprofit spaces, and I feel like I can say the same for public service depending on what level and what branch you're in. And also job hunting is like a full-time job. If I could retweet what Kent said, I would. And so don't stress. Before I go into my story, for those who are going to be graduating soon, don't stress too much. Enjoy your freedom for a little bit. Take a breather. And we understand, like, we know we've probably experienced pressure from like our parents, our family, friends, so on and so forth. We're like, why haven't you gotten a job yet? Take some time for yourself. You worked really hard to get to where you are, you know? So take care of yourself. I'll say for me, so I graduated when the pandemic first came on, and I was stressed because I had already taken a little bit more time than I would have liked in undergrad because I switched majors very late. And I didn't want to graduate and have nothing to show for it, even though my parents were very understanding of the fact that we were going, this hadn't happened before, or at least in a very long time. And so I was trying to reach out to a lot of different folks. In spring of 2020, people were not hiring. They simply were not hiring because, there was a global pandemic happening. We couldn't tell what was happening next. The term unprecedented times was like in every other newsletter or email you could have gotten. And I was freaking out. But I was like, surely someone has to be hiring. Thankfully, it was the 2020 election cycle. So I started reaching out to my old contacts. And so if I could just reiterate what the people before me have said, networking is very important. I would also like to agree and say, like, preferably something more meaningful, not so transactional. I feel like that's something that's very common in the DMV, the DC area. If you end up here post-grad, it's a little bit more transactional and you'll get better at navigating those. And sometimes that's just the way it is. But I went back to my old internships and I said, hey, I'm graduating. By any chance, are you hiring? And but I was able to do those kinds of things. I was able to reach out to those nonprofits and old offices that I worked for because I maintained a relationship with them. So my first piece of advice is if you have interned or worked in other offices or other spaces, maintain that relationship. Send a check-in email once every few months or once a year, whenever you're in town. Because it makes it, again, this sounds transactional, but it makes it a little easier because it's not, you're not just coming out of the blue like, hey, I need a job, but like, mean what you say when you send that email. But maintain those relationships. So I reached out to the people who I had interned with, and turns out one of them, and Citizens United, was looking for a political assistant. So I luckily somehow got a job during the pandemic. And I worked through the end of the 2020 cycle. And then after that, I had joined a bunch of different Google listservs. So depending on where you move post-grad, try to join those like online or virtual communities like Google Groups or whatnot, because people will post jobs all the time. So I joined one listserv that was called Jobs That Are Left, and they were more like political, like I see kids laughing, like more political, progressive job postings, and I found a job for school board staff aide. I applied to that because that was my representative on local government. I've never done local government before. And so I ended up getting that job and I was there for 2.5 years. And then actually it's funny, Temujin, I never got to tell you this, but after the panel last year, I was working in the school board office and we had Delegate Shin on the panel last year. And we had connected previously at a Christmas party with other people from the Fairfax area, but she had messaged me after the panel. She was like, hey, do you know anyone that's looking to be an outreach rep in the Senate? And I was like, me. So I feel very fondly about this. I have very fond memories and I feel, what's the word? I'm blanking out. English is my only language, but I loved the panel. I never got to tell you that, Temujin, but being on the panel last year actually connected me to someone who brought me to my current job. Again, and it was because I was really like, I was really good luck. And also the fact that Temujin asked me to be on the panel. So thank you, Temujin. But again, it's connecting, it's networking. My second piece of advice, or third, I've lost track, is be very open-minded. Talk to people. You don't know what their stories are or what they may be looking for. Yes, and thank you, Dr. Nina Ha, for introducing us. I think I just genuinely like to hear from different people. I like to know what their stories, their backgrounds are, because everyone's different. and you may never know what that connection or that relationship might lead to. I didn't think being on this panel last year would help lead me to my current job in the Senate. So yeah, I mean, everyone has also given really good advice too. One of the main themes I saw was just networking, but building meaningful relationships. That's the difference.
I cannot top that. For me, so I also graduated as Jacqueline did in 2020 when the pandemic started. And I still remember how the bittersweet moments of realizing, oh shoot, like we're in a worldwide pandemic, but also like all our homeworks are canceled, or like tests started getting canceled left and right, and thinking, never had professor check up on us like emotionally, and I was like, this is great, But for me, after I graduated, I was living with my grandparents, and you know, um, for me, it was much of a figuring out what I can do in the realm of while taking care of my family, and so um, I just kind of left it to whatever comes at the time. And one of the great things, and really goes to how networking is important, is I I had in the past participated in a Korean American Grassroots Conference. They had a smaller conference for college students, and I got connected to their program coordinators, and we had great conversations here and there. I asked him, hey, look, I am kind of stuck at home. I need to take care of my grandparents. Is there anything I can do to help? There was a conference coming up. Can I volunteer for that? Is there anything, like spreadsheet, like boring stuff, anything, I'm happy to do. What started out as a volunteer offer turned into a like, hey, like, would you like to intern for us? And then eventually became a temporary employee. One thing I can say about nonprofit is because they're running on very limited resources. Sometimes they're depending on who you ask, it can be really great or really, really bad. And for me, I think it's like somewhere in the middle, but it could have really gone bad, right? For me, that's how it ended up being. Like I just got tossed into this world, not knowing what to do, and eventually, um, I got to a point. I want to work on the Hill. I don't know how to get there. I had interned in the past, but I did not really have anyone looking out for me to say, hey, like you should probably keep networking. You should probably meet this person, meet that person. And so what ended up happening for me is I just kept applying to offices without any strategy, just hoping that eventually one will stick. That doesn't work. So um, I got to a point where I realized, maybe the Hill is not the place, because I applied for like entry level and then I'm not getting any. I said, why don't I apply for internship? And I'm not getting any of those either. So I'm like, okay, well, how low can I go at this point, or should I just change, to a different, profession? So I seriously consider like teaching, and looking like what to do, how if I were to go into teaching, like what kind of process I had to go through. What if I just what if I don't have anything, and then because I love like touring DC, I thought like, oh, maybe my plan C could be just a tour guide for DC. Like I had so many thoughts, right? I was like, okay, like this is not how it's supposed to be according to my plan. What am I supposed to do? Thankfully, I had a thought, I should just like reach out like personally, and I wouldn't recommend that in general, but there are some great people kind of looking out. And for me, I cold emailed, and if you look at a political like newsletter, at the end, like there's like the transition, and you see people who started new job in this office, that office. And I was like, I'm gonna cold email this person in the office that I like. I'm gonna see what happens. So I cold emailed her. She said, "Oh, there's no position for you." I was like, "Oh, darn it!" But soon after, I get a email from someone else who with the last name very familiar. And later, I was talking to that person on a Zoom call. Like he asked me if I'm interested in this position, which I have now. And I said, this is great. I'm like talking to this person. I realized like, oh, like you're the husband of the person that I cold emailed. And so what happened was, they kind of talked about it, and they were like, oh, this guy, English might not be his, forte, but he has great digital, right? So maybe I'm assuming that's how the conversation went. And eventually, they offered me the job, and I've been here since then. And so, I really think that, while much of it could be up to a chance, like, at least for me, it was much up to a chance. I think it's also you choosing to pave that way for you to like optimize the chances, optimize the chance of you running into those opportunities. And so, for me, like, make sure to build bridges, don't burn them. And absolutely, like, don't be afraid to reach out to people, but make sure to have some strategy behind it, because if you just throw spaghetti and hope, some stick, like, there are times when none of them stick, and you're gonna self-doubt your worth, and you go down the rabbit hole that you don't really need to subject yourself to. So
Yeah, and I can definitely attest to the networking part. Just kind of similar to what Junuk experienced. I had applied for an internship this past summer in a congressional office. I had the interview and everything. I was one step close, but ultimately they said, sorry, you're not from the district. Goodbye. A few days later, I get an email saying, oh, the internship coordinator from the office that rejected you sent your material over to us, and you're in our district, so we would love to have you. We would like to set up an interview. Did all of that. And the same day, like 2 hours later, I get a phone call. I'm in the middle of class in Torg Hall, and there's no reception in there. So I leave class, run outside, take the call, would love to offer you a position. So that just really shows how great networks are. And, if you maintain the right balance, like building the bridges, maintaining a relationship, keeping in contact with them, it really does um, benefit you a lot. And not just like, having a job or internship, but also just having another friend and mentor. Because Junuk and I, we met at a reception somewhere in DC. We somehow, I don't know how we ended up talking to each other. We found out we're from the same hometown, same like, just a lot of similarities. And he's also helped provide a lot of mentorship when I was on the Hill. He had like a group chat with a bunch of other interns that he knew, and would like take us on like these like secret off the radar tours of the Capitol. But it just really shows how networks are important. And same with Jackie too. I'm pretty sure she's the reason why I'm able to intern for Senator Warner's Roanoke office right now. But it's just really, I can definitely confirm that networks can really help you a lot, and it's really important to build those bridges and not burn them. But something I did realize when I was working or interning in public service, and I've also had some experience in nonprofits, is they don't really pay well. They're notoriously known for not having the best salaries or wages compared to like your friends, your BIT friends working for Deloitte or Capital One, whatever. So I just want to ask, how do y'all overcome that hurdle and continue working in this field? What keeps you going and, waking up every morning and going to work and just, keeping that train moving along the tracks?
So I've had friends who worked in nonprofits on the Hill, just entry-level jobs where their primary income just couldn't support their living expenses, which one, it sucks. Not everyone can afford to do that. I certainly couldn't. I had colleagues who were just telling me like, oh, I'm making like 36K a year, but my parents are helping me with rent. And I was like, I can't lean on my parents to help me with rent or anything like that. I think, well, I remind myself that I love what I do. And when it comes down to it, I just remind myself that I'm in this job because I like to help people. I know I've said that many times, but that's the truth of it. And if you like what you do, sometimes you'll try to find ways to supplement your income. Some people might work part-time jobs, some might, you know, they may compromise on their lifestyle. Again, I'm just being very honest. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat it for anyone because that's the truth. But, for me, sometimes I would do like part-time gigs here and there just because I wanted to make some extra money. But also advice that I would have is when you are interviewing for jobs, you should negotiate. Doesn't matter if you are being offered a job in the public sector or a nonprofit, you should still negotiate your worth. It doesn't hurt to ask. They may say no, or they might not be able to give you what you're looking for, but they might be able to compromise. And maybe they can give you like a 10% increase or more vacation days or something like that. I'm just thinking about things that are coming to mind, but it's hard. I wish I could say I wish I could give better advice, but really I stick with this because I love what I do. And I also know that that in this role, I'm able to help a lot of people. And it also lets me meet new people as well. And so I don't know, normally I can answer questions well. This is one that stumps me, but I just tell people like, I went into public service knowing it doesn't, I'm not making six figures, but I'm okay with that because I'm okay with the lifestyle that I have. I'm sure someone else here can give way better advice.
I can't, but I think it's sorry. I think it's really as as mentioned earlier, there are those opportunities, at least for internships. There are those opportunities, like they would pay you to intern, which I think is a great opportunity. I never got paid, except for like one time stipend. But even that was to me kind of question a lot of things. But um, I think when it comes to government sector, or at least on the Hill, like I can speak from my own personal experience. I think there's just a lot of faith involved, that like this will eventually like expose me enough to, if I want to go on to next step, that it would help me propel into that role. I could even go and kind of share my personal tip, but um, for me, when I was in student government in college, I made a lot of graphics. Like I was in comms director there, and student government, like they have a lot of events that are like everywhere. I just like made a lot of graphics, and I just showed that to this office, and they're like, love it, great, start it. And honestly, like I see digital is such a huge demand, especially on the Hill, and as you can imagine, for Republican offices. So it was how I, personally, how I found even on the Hill to have a bit of a better edge is to have some skills that other people don't have. And so I think that's really figuring out what the kind of reading the room and finding out what is needed, and kind of finding that hook is, in my opinion, very important.
My advice is pretty cliche, just doing what you love. I'm from Louisiana, from the South, so our minimum wage is $7.25. So when I got my first full-time job in Chicago for the startup tech company, I got 35,000 a year, which I thought was a lot. I was like, this is more money than I made any year working any job. But I was struggling still. And I got the same salary when I first started at OCA. But I kind of knew this going into like this space that my lifestyle, I don't think I'll ever be rich, and I'm okay with like not owning like a house and things like that, like so I kind of just had those expectations of like living small. I have a lot of student loans and stuff like that that is pretty a lot of pressure, but I think I just have the privilege of like knowing that if I do fail or if I do need money, like I can ask my parents for like a little bit of money. They're not rich by any means, but I know that they would be willing to give me like, several $100s if I need to ask. And then like when I was struggling to find a job in Portland, they told me, if it's okay to like, you're not a failure if you can't find a job, like you come back home and live with us and like, and just eventually just work on yourself. And so I just know like not having the pressure of like I'm gonna be homeless if I don't get paid enough. Um, and I think just like because I have an older sister who she never graduated college. She like kind of was to start her home business and like she's really successful now. And so I'm like, well, if I fail, at least my sister can take care of my parents. So she's like kind of wealthier now. And so like also don't have the pressure to support my parents because my older sister can do that. Um, and so I think it's just again just going into the mindset of like what is your actual lifestyle expectations? What can you compromise on? I love living in the DC area. Like I think it's amazing having public transportation and reliable transportation and like cold weather. That's stuff that I don't have in back home. And so I love living here and doing a job that I love. So again, I get to work with students, developing them. I'm always like a reference to like I have like I don't know how many intern alumni I have now, but there's 20 a year, so times 5 years, what, 100, I don't know. But like I'm always, a reference for them. And like I'm always just like proud of the achievements they make and like where they end up and like just maintaining relationships with them and seeing that I've made an impact on them by like giving them these opportunities to be placed at these different organizations that support their goals. And so I just love doing what I do, and I don't know um, how long I plan to stay or what if I ever plan to leave or what my next steps are. And so right now I'm kind of just happy and content with everything right now, but we'll see. So
Yeah, y'all. No one comes into this work with a wealth mindset. And I don't think I can, speak to that part any better than Jackie, Junwook, and Kent have. But I do really want to emphasize going into it with the perspective of holistic wellness. Financial wellness is such a crucial part, and you definitely need to consider what financial capacities you want to have going into a sector, going into a field, going into your career. But also, you need to know yourself enough to understand what kind of work keeps you mentally well, emotionally well, physically. Is the work I'm going to contribute to my career wellness? Is there a path that I can take that will lead to growth? And for me personally, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier of taking that time off to really understand myself, to develop my political analysis, to develop these different perspectives, just so I know myself really well and my values really well going into the work. You need to be able to identify that for there to be growth. So, for example, I know that what I care about the most is helping out API communities and the Vietnamese community in the area. My job at DVRP offers me a lot of networks that I can tap into for that and to get to know a lot of folks. Another thing that DVRP does is we do arts-based practices. So we have healing spaces for the general public and community that I attend as an employee and that I help facilitate. And they're really creative. Some of them have been like floral arrangement, comic making, we have a block printing one coming up. So I'm an artist, so I'm able to have an artistic channel to engage in with the work that I do. And of course, I don't put all of my artistic time into my career. I spend a lot of time separately from DVRP working on myself as a musician and as an artist. But knowing that there are certain features of this job that inspire me and push me and motivate me to continue doing the work really helps sustain it. And another thing I want to mention that I don't think has been really mentioned precisely within this panel yet is there is such a huge difference between different nonprofit organizations, and that depends on the folks you serve. It depends where you get the funding from. It depends how big the organization is. It also depends who works at the organization. And I've been extremely privileged to work at DVRP because these are all Asian folks. They're either gender nonconforming or women. So a lot of them do have similar experiences to me. And we treat each other in a way that is community centered and very caring and very considerate of our emotional needs. So just kind of understand those power dynamics when you're going into any type of career as well, and that will definitely help you.
I only have a few things to add to everything that folks have said. In any job that you do, make sure you set boundaries with your work. Like having a work-life balance is absolutely crucial when you're not getting paid that much. Like I make 52K in the DC metro area, and I can do that because I live with my parents, which is not a bad thing. But anyways, like for the first 1 to 2 years of my job, I like would overwork because I thought I'd like need to impress my manager for a future recommendation letter, or and also like because I was working at a small nonprofit, um sorry, everyone. Phở mẹ ạ. Sorry. I said I wanted pho for dinner. Um, because I worked at a small nonprofit, it usually means you're the only one in your role. So I'd always be like, if I can't do it, like then no one else can. But also I had to think like, but this job isn't my life. So why am I thinking about work and doing work outside of work hours? And it took me a while to realize that like me having a lot of work isn't my fault. It's my employer's fault for not hiring more people. And I'd either advocate to get another person on my team or I'd ask for more money. So, um, like part of that also comes from having like a healthy work and having a healthy work environment, and especially a manager that listens to and advocates for your needs. I've been fortunate to have that at Humke Center. But I hope that for all your current and future workplaces that you work to have that kind of workplace environment as well.
Wonderful. And that really, just shows like you can't be a material girl in this field. You're just gonna have to suck it up. That bottom line up front. I don't know how else to put it. But we're gonna shift gears. We're going into our last question now. And it's a little multifaceted. But hopefully we can speed run this so we have time for the open Q&A. So I want to ask is, do y'all have any advice to share, especially advice you wish you had received while you were in college? For those who are still deciding what to pursue as their major or contemplating working in this field, and especially for the students who are graduating next month.
Can I get a show of hand from the folks in the A Center room that are like help run a student organization or have helped run a student organization in the past? Yeah, a few of us. Okay, so you know how when you help run an organization and you're part of a team, you check in regularly to see what can be improved, check in regularly to see what's coming up, what's working, what's not working, stuff like that. Yeah, y'all need to do that with yourself. And when I say that, I mean like actually date yourself. Set in time to check in with yourself. What are my values right now? How am I feeling with the way that my life is going? What can be improved? What can I do better? And just be realistic about that. Take yourself seriously because you matter and you're the person that's going to be taking care of you the most. And really ground yourself in firm values so you know who you are and you know how you want to move in different spaces.
I would say I'm just looking here. I think all of us on the panel, like we're young Asian Americans in public service and nonprofits. I think, and folks may agree or disagree with me, but I know public service doesn't pay the bills, but I'm young and I may never be able to do something like this again because as I get older and I'm gonna maybe want to start a family, have kids, own property or something like that, you know, my job may not be able to accommodate that lifestyle and things may change. But when you're young, you have so many opportunities, and we're all still young on this panel, but it's when you have, if you are able to, and you don't have others depending on you, if you don't have other life circumstances that, if you make decisions, it affects other people, take those opportunities. I've been telling a lot of people to say yes to things more. And also try new things be open to new opportunities that you may be a little uncomfortable for. I was told, like, one of my first internships, the president CEO of the nonprofit that I worked with, she said you grow most when you're outside of your comfort zone. And I could not agree more, because once you're comfortable somewhere, of course, like, you want to be comfortable, you want to be happy where you are, but once you start to fall into that rut, you're not growing, you're not learning, you're not challenging yourself, you're just complicit. I grew the most in the times where I felt like the ground was shaky underneath me and I had to think quick. I had to act fast. And so I would encourage you all, especially if, if you have the means or the circumstances, to branch out and do more things on your own, to take that opportunity, because you may not always get that chance. Yeah, I feel like that's something I live by now more nowadays, because it's hard. It seems like there's so many rules, there's so many restrictions with things. But to any opportunity I have, I'll say yes. And so far, it's served me pretty well, and I think it will for you all too.
I can go next. My advice is apply to jobs even if you think you're unqualified. One of the first jobs, nonprofits I applied to was for a management level position, which I did not think I was qualified for, and I got multiple rounds of interviews. So I was like, okay, that's good. Didn't get hired, but it was like a good confidence booster. So the first full-time job I got, the startup company in Chicago, um, there was a task I had to do during the interview, which was like an Excel task. I did not know how to use Excel. But I put it on my resume that I did. It's because like I had professors like just lie. They're like lie on your resume and then you just learn on the job. And so I thought that could work, but I didn't know how to do the task. So I thought I bombed the interview. I even said I had to like email the task to the CEO. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't I don't know how to do this. Um, but thankfully, with the benefit of like my friend who worked for the company, she was able to kind of vouch for me to my boss and say that you can always teach someone how to do something, but you can't like teach like personality fit. And so, thankfully my interview went well, like personally, but not skill wise. And so I was able to get hired and just learn how to do the job. Um, and so, just apply even if you don't think you're qualified. Um, and I also would say, similar to what I said earlier about like being involved in like student orgs and stuff on campus, um, those skills that you gain are really transferable to your career. My major did not help me at all with any of these jobs, as an art and film major. But my event planning experience, budgeting, workshop development, facilitating things like that I did in college with VSA was transferable to my job at OCA, or like with various tasks at the startup tech company. So yeah, I mean, I already spoke about being involved, networking, applying to jobs even if you don't think you're qualified, and I think that's those three advice. So yeah.
I think my advice for y'all who are graduating soon, or anyone really, is for me, when I started when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after I graduate, the plan just couldn't happen because of COVID, right? So I think for me, who's a little pain in the ass, a little like perfectionist sometimes, um, I think the advice I needed for myself is start somewhere. Because if I keep going and thinking about like what I want and keep pursuing, like, you know, if I get lucky, I will get in. But there are times when you would feel discouraged and you realize, okay, what am I doing? And I think the advice given earlier about how you should really put yourself out there and go to clubs, like get involved, lead organization. That's great. I think use those skills to plan long term. I think if we are only focused on what's immediately in front of us and thinking about how we can make the impact, that's great. And it may feel great, but then I think the longer you stay and the longer you build your skills and ability, and the more you marinate yourself, I think you would eventually you could make a bigger impact. I know, Jacqueline, you're really, I think we'll have a great conversation if we get coffee later. You talked about how, when it comes to, sorry, I thought about coffee and kind of lost my thought there, but you talked about how, I'll get back to it, but I think for me, thinking long term also means the ability to kind of building yourself up to sorry, I drink a lot of coffee just now, but building yourself up to becoming to understand what's going on. Sorry, I remember just now. So if you want to run for like, for example, if you want to make the impact, like right now it could be the time, but eventually you could make the same pitch later on, and if you feel so strongly about the community, get familiar with the community and eventually run for offices. Like those are those are possibilities too. Like you don't have to always be young to make the impact. Yeah, like we look at all these old people, in the government offices, and you realize, oh shoot, like they're really old. How are they supposed to represent us? They do have some understanding about what's going on in the field that we don't have, because they just have spent so much time thinking about what it means to serve in the community. And so I'm not here advocating for like old people running the country, but I think there is a reason why they keep getting elected, unlike what we think should be, right? And so that's the big thing. I think yeah, so for me, it's I would say just start somewhere, make sure that you know what you're make sure to plan out what's ahead of you. Doesn't have to be very specific, but some the kind of path you want to go down eventually. And I think that's going to be great if just talking with the people that you want to reach out, and just getting coffee and getting a chance to learn someone else's stories, and reflecting yourself. I think that's gonna serve you well in the long term.
I'll keep it quick. Much like how your major doesn't necessarily define your career, and how your extracurriculars might be more instrumental than you think in building your career, I would still say the same after getting a job as well. Like fulfill your life with things that bring you joy. Um, for Jess, I see that it's music, community building and art. And for for me, it was how do you say it? For me it was like really finding and building intentional Vietnamese community. Like I've grown up in the Nova area my whole life, but and I would say I have this nebulous Vietnamese community, but I've actually truly found it when I helped found Viet Place Collective. And so that's it's like another job, to be honest, on top of my current job. It already doesn't pay that much, and I'm also not getting paid for VPC, but like it helps fuel my days. I find so much joy and love from the community we've built around similar values of like anti-displacement, cultural preservation, and stuff like that. So yeah, have hobbies outside of your job. But like before you get your job, much like Kent said, you should have Riz in your interview. Um, don't go in there all like too professional and uptight, because they'll notice and then you'll be too nervous, right? So I think I was a personality hire. They liked me a lot, so she called me back five months later. That doesn't happen to everyone. I'm like currently hiring for my manager right now. And like there are some folks who are like, oh, you're kind of boring, or you're too uptight. And like like hiring for personality truly is a thing. So keep that in mind as well.
All right. So I believe that was everyone. We've gone through all the questions, and I don't think, yeah, there's no time for open Q&A, unfortunately. However, I can provide my email to everyone in attendance, and if they have any questions they wanted to ask, they can email me and I'll forward it to our panelists. And once they get back, I can send that answer back to you. and such, and start that network building. But anyways, that does conclude APIDAs in public service and nonprofits. Thank you to the panelists for participating in this event and bearing with me as well for the past few months. They brought such great insight and knowledge tonight, and I hope everyone in attendance was able to learn a lot more about what it's like to pursue a career in nonprofits and public service. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Nina Ha for allowing me to plan and moderate this discussion tonight. And lastly, thank you to everyone who joined us tonight and for supporting the APIDA Plus Center at Virginia Tech and the APIDA community at large. It really means a lot to all of us. And with that, I wish everyone a good rest of their evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you, Temujin. You did such a great job.